Hi everybody. Okay, so we've done quite a lot of work recently on how to answer each question, and you've been given practice on the various papers and the questions that come up. Today we're going to focus on another aspect of it. We're going to concentrate on the SPaG aspect of your work today, and that is particularly important for question 5. When you do question 5 on the exam, it's the one where you have to do your own writing, because you are awarded marks specifically for how well you spell and how well you punctuate and how ambitious your vocabulary is. So some of this you might know already, some of it might be new to you, but I suggest that all of you will benefit from learning a little bit about using perhaps more complex punctuation marks, because every time that you do it will elevate your marks, as long as you use them in the correct way. Okay, so our learning objective today is, why is it important to punctuate your work? And obviously this applies not only to your exams, but when you come in, you might be somebody who writes lots of emails and things like that already, but when you have to send letters and things like that, or apply for jobs, proper punctuation is really essential. It's very essential. I've got a few funny examples to show you later in the lesson as to why it is very important to punctuate your work properly, because it can alter the meaning completely. So we're going to first of all just think about basic punctuation, like full stops and commas, and then we're going to look at this comma splicing. It's a little bit later when we come to doing that learning outcome, I'm going to ask you if you've ever heard of it. And then the next one is to identify when to use colons and semicolons. Okay, let's go. So let's just remind ourselves quickly of the assessment objectives for writing. We're not going to look at AO5 today, because that's not going to be the focus of the lesson. We're going to look at AO6. Candidates must use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect, with accurate spelling and punctuation. This requirement must constitute 20% of the marks for each specification as a whole. Okay, so let's just look at the first sentence there. Candidates must use a wide range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose and effect, with accurate spelling and punctuation. Just have a look at that. I'll underline it, and I want you to tell me one thing that you understand from that. What are they looking for? So there's the bit that I want you to concentrate on. What do you think the examiners will be looking for when they award marks for this particular part of the exam? What will they want to see in your writing? If you're struggling, I'm just going to put a poll up. That's a great start there, Lois. Yeah, they're looking for ambitious vocabulary, so not just using ordinary everyday sort of bland words, but using words that are very precise, very detailed, and give clear pictures in people's heads, make clear images. They're looking for a variety of sentence structures. Okay, so they're not just looking for the whole thing being written in simple sentence structures. You've done that with Sharon. When you have lots of simple sentences, the writing can sound very robotic, it can sound very childlike as well. So they want to see a variety of simple, compound and complex sentences. And then Lois, you've just addressed that, the correct SPaG. Okay, so language for effect, well done. Exactly, Charlotte. Okay, so they also want to see that you can use a wide variety of punctuation marks. Okay, because what people tend to do when they write is that they can just use sort of the most obvious and simple forms of punctuation. If you can demonstrate to an examiner that you know exactly when to use a semicolon or when it's appropriate to put a set of brackets around something, then it will, as I say, elevate your marks. Okay, so let's have a think about why this is so important. Why is it so important? Well, you can see here for A06, it's worth 16 marks. Okay, so over the two papers, there are 32 marks to be had for the quality of your punctuation. That's a lot, isn't it? That can be the difference, a huge grade boundary difference. So if you are consistent with your punctuation and that you demonstrate that you understand how to use it correctly, it could, it could make you from a solid 4 into a 6, for example, a grade 6. So hopefully you'll see why it's important to think about it. Now, one of the best ways, apart from sort of knowing rules and practicing them, is also by reading, because when you read you start to see how good writers put punctuation marks in for effect. Okay, quick question, how many of you do read for pleasure? I'm just going to put yes no poll on the screen. How many of you read for pleasure? Okay. What about you, Jack? Do you ever read anything for pleasure? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a sort of war and peace book or something like that. It could just be that you read, I don't know, instruction manuals, or you might read things online every now and then. But reading is an excellent way of not only improving your own vocabulary and your own writing skills, but also looking at how writers use punctuation. Okay, Harry, Jack, I've not heard anything from. We've got a 50-50 there for the 4 people who did vote. So 2 are saying yes and 2 saying no. If you don't read, I suggest it's a great way actually of revising without even realising it for English. Reading other people's work will help you. Yeah, Charlotte, I'm a bit guilty of that as well, not often enough. I'm reading Michelle Obama's autobiography at the moment because I think she's great. And it's interesting, but it's a huge book. Actually, it's so thick, it's quite hard to hold it and keep the pages open. It's very good, yeah, it's a really good read. Okay, so let's move on. So very quickly, very simply now, look at your keyboard and find every punctuation mark on the keyboard and post it into the chat box for me. Thank you, Lois. Okay, yeah, okay. Can you find any others there, Lois? Harry, I'd like you to do the same, and Jack, please, and Charlotte and Tom. Search the keyboard for them. Okay, thanks, Harry. Thanks, Lois. Yeah, you've got the apostrophe now, Lois. Okay, so you're getting there. Tom, could you do the same for me, please? Just find all the punctuation marks and put them into the chat box. There is a good reason for it. Thanks, Tom. Okay, interesting. Now, most of you have got a very good range of punctuation marks there. Some of you have put something that you think is a punctuation mark that isn't actually a punctuation mark, but that will become clear on our next slide. Okay. So, not this, the next slide, we're going to look at that. This is a question for you to think to yourselves now. How confident are you that you can use punctuation correctly? So click yes if you think you can use punctuation correctly, and no if there are things that you still would like to know about. Okay, thanks. Thanks Tom, Charlotte, thanks Harry. How about you, Jack? What do you think? What about Lois? Are you confident that you can use it? Okay, interesting. So most of you feel quite confident there, but some others don't. Okay, so this is just a little cartoony thing. I think we should take a break for a second. There's a comma. I think we should stop altogether, a full stop. I agree. Giving emphasis there for an exclamation mark. What are you guys talking about? For a question mark. Okay, so these are the punctuation marks that you could have included. I don't think I saw this one from anyone. Can anybody tell me what that is called? Where you use 3 dots. Well done, Charlotte. Yeah, it's ellipsis. Okay. So have a look at your list. Can you see there, Tom, you put the hashtag? That's not considered to be a punctuation mark, although we do use it quite a lot now, especially in social media, don't we? Okay, yeah, that's fine. So let's just quickly go to each person. So Charlotte, what's that? What would we call that? Speech marks, well done. Harry, what would we call that? Well done, it's a colon. Jack, what's that? Lois, I'm going to ask you, well done, Jack. Yeah, absolutely, it's a semicolon. Lois, if you can tell me what that is. And Tom, if you can tell me what that one is. Okay. So Lois, you're going to tell me which one this one is here. And Tom, you're going to tell me what that is. Well done, it's an exclamation mark, Tom. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of all the circles on there. Charlotte, I'll just come to you. Could you underline for me the ones that you think are used most? Which punctuation marks are used most, would you say? Definitely, yeah. Yeah. Those tend to be the ones, the go-to ones, and then I would say, yes, in order, maybe exclamation marks and question marks are probably the next ones. Fantastic. Okay. I'll just take the pen back. Oops, it's not gone to me yet. There we are. Okay. So you knew what those were. So over to you now. Why do you think, have a bit of a think, why do you think we need punctuation marks? Why do we have to use them? Well done, Lois, I've just seen there you've put bracket in. Why is it important to have punctuation marks? Yeah, and how does it make it easier to read? What does it do? Charlotte's put that. Well done, Harry. You've said so. Charlotte said to make it easier to read. Harry says to take a breath sometimes when reading. Yeah, punctuation can be used fantastically well for effect. So it can really give drama to a piece, or it can give clarity to a piece of writing. Well done. Lois has said makes the writing more interesting. It does, and it can give extra information and make it eligible to read. Yeah. So if it's illegible, then it's not making sense, is it? So it helps our writing to make sense, and it can be used very, very well to support the words, as can sentence structure. Okay, so when you get punctuation, sentence structure, and words all working beautifully together, that's when you get fantastic writing. If you just have great words but no punctuation, you're not really going to make any sense. Okay. Well done, everybody. So have a look at this. This is just a silly example. If you don't think punctuation is important, try forgetting the comma when you tell somebody, "I'm sorry, I love you." Now, how would that read? Think to yourselves now if we didn't have that comma there. How would it read? So ignore that comma. "I'm sorry, I love you." It means something entirely different, doesn't it? You know, it's somebody, without the punctuation mark, it's somebody sort of regretting really that they love somebody. "I'm really sorry I love you." So you can see it dramatically changes the meaning of a sentence sometimes. Okay, there's quite a few. If you're interested in having a look at this, there's an internet site called Grammarly, and they've got. It's funny because they use these cards, and when you see it written like that, I think it can really help you to understand. So if you Google Grammarly, that's it's a good site to look at. So it's very important to use punctuation effectively at GCSE level. It improves the quality of your writing. It carries a high number of marks, 16 marks out of 80, which is a lot. And leaving out punctuation marks can alter the meaning of your words, and it can also make it terribly hard for the examiner to read. Now, you don't want to be doing that. They've only got a certain window of opportunity to read your work and make sure that it all makes sense. And if you make it hard for them to read it because you've not put a single full stop in it, they're going to sort of give up, and they're going to think, "Oh, this is too hard to get through." So you've got to make it easy for the examiner, but as I say, when words and sentence structure and punctuation all work together, that's when you've got the sort of you've got three great devices all working together, and it improves the quality of your work. Okay. The examiner will also expect you to use a range of punctuation. So you won't get great marks for AO6, as I say, if you just use full stops and commas and remember to use capital letters. They'd see that as being quite simple use of punctuation, and so your grade would get lowered. So let's start with an easy one. What can you tell me about full stops? All of you have a go. Yeah, and what is a sentence? When we're talking about a sentence, what do we mean? Well done, Tom. Yeah, it ends a sentence. Lois has said the same. And Charlotte. It's a statement, but there's a little bit more you could add to it, Charlotte. Can anybody else add to what Charlotte's just put to tell us what a sentence is? What does a sentence have to do? Yeah, it has to get a point across, but it also has to make sense on its own. So a sentence shouldn't need anything else around it for it to make sense. You could take that sentence out of the piece that's written, put it somewhere else, and somebody reading it would understand it. It would make sense. So it contains a subject and a verb. Okay, let me just double check in with you. Is that making sense to you? Quick yes, no. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Lois. How about you, Harry? Is that making sense? So a sentence has to make sense on its own. Thanks. How about you, Jack? Is that okay with you? Fab. Okay, so you're all saying yes now. It's one of the things, I suppose you've been taught this many, many times in English from being little tots in primary school. Okay. So if we have a look at this, it's from BBC Bitesize, you can see. A text without full stops is very hard to read. So let's have a read of this, and then let's have a read of this when punctuation has been added. When thinking of a new invention, it's important that you try to imagine a solution to a problem. For example, something that causes people problems. My nan says she hates having to reach down for her stick. She could do with some sort of machine to rest it next to her. Another idea that I had was some sort of multi-weather coat could automatically get thicker. That way it could be used all year round. You know, if you were reading that, maybe in an exam, you were an examiner, you'd think, oh, what the heck? I've got to try now and work out what this person is saying. Yet by adding the full stops, it immediately starts to make sense. So when thinking of a new invention, comma, it's important that you try to imagine a solution to a problem. For example, something that causes people problems. My nan says she hates having to reach down for a stick. She could do with some sort of machine to rest it next to her. Another idea I had was some sort of multi-weather coat. It could automatically get thicker. That way it could be used all year round. Exactly. There's no time to breathe, and you don't know which idea goes with what, which is what Lois has just said in the chat box. So it's terribly hard to read that. You do need to it's almost like orchestrating it, and it orders your thoughts far more effectively. Okay, so commas. These are also used quite regularly. Okay, and again, just taking out that comma there can alter the meaning. So we've got slow Animal Crossing, and here we've got slow Animal Crossing. So can you see the difference between the two? How does the comma there alter the meaning of those two instructions? So in this first one, yeah, so this pause here, this comma here, it's telling us to slow down, isn't it? Because there's an animal crossing the road. Slow, Animal Crossing. It's distinguishing between the two parts of the instruction. Here, slow Animal Crossing, that tells us that an animal that's very, very slow, like a tortoise, is crossing. So there's an enormous difference. So just that little punctuation mark can make a world of difference because it alters the meaning there. So commas indicate a pause. They show how sentences are split up, and commas can alter the meaning in a sentence, and we've looked at those two examples. So I'm just going to check in because Charlotte and Lois answered there, but I'm just going to check in with everybody else. Did that make sense to you as you looked at it? Could you see how that comma made a difference? Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Lois. I knew you understood because you answered the question. How about you, Harry and Jack? How did that make sense to you when you saw it? Brilliant. I'll have a read of what you've said in a second, Harry. Jack, how about you? Was that okay with you? Charlotte, you don't really have to respond because, yeah, okay. Wouldn't the first also be slow Animal Crossing? Don't quite get what you're talking about there, Harry. That one there is an instruction to us because there's an animal crossing the road. So it's telling you to slow down because animals are crossing the road. Here it's just telling us information that there is a slow animal crossing the road. Okay, let's move on. You've probably seen this one, haven't you? How again the comma can alter the meaning. Let's eat grandma. Okay, and then we've got let's eat grandma. We've got the pause there. So this one is suggesting that everybody eats grandma for their tea. And then the second one, it's saying to grandma, should we eat now? So again, it says there, punctuation saves lives. Have you seen that example before? Quick yes, no. Sometimes they have it as a let's eat children. Okay, some of you have seen it, some of you have not. Ah, you've put the S on there. Yes, I understand that, Harry. Yes, slow animals crossing. Yeah, you could have the S on the end. Well done, Harry. Well, and well done for observing that as well. That's very good. Okay, so commas. I'm going to ask you to do your own example in a second. They're used to separate items in a list as well. So you can see here we've got a rule of three, haven't we? Describing the storm. The storm was violent, powerful, and destructive. So you need a comma there, but you don't need one there because you've got the connective. I am taking GCSEs in English, Maths, and Science. I like Indian, Chinese, and Italian food. And here's the next one. I need to buy trainers, socks, a rucksack, chocolate, and a latte. Okay, so I'd like you now to use to write your own example in the chat box. I want everybody to do it. So Charlotte, Harry, Jack, Lois, Tom, write your own example in the chat box now using a comma to separate items in the list. You could do a rule of three. So do something like the first three if you want. Lovely, that's great, Lois. And Charlotte, I love Christmas dinner. Roast potatoes, stuffing and gravy. I bought wrapping paper, a coat and a wreath for my flat. I like football, Netflix and YouTube. Well done. Full stop at the end there needed, Harry. So Tom, I need an example from you, and Jack, I need an example from you. Just have a quick think. Well done, Harry, thank you. Just whilst you're thinking of that, because I do want you both to write one, Tom and Jack, I'm just going to move the slides on so we're not waiting. Just post those in the chat box when you've finished writing them. Okay, so let's just think now about how we did with that first learning outcome. Learning all about why punctuation is important, how to use it properly. Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Charlotte and Lois. Thanks, Tom. Jack, could you let me know, please, how you're getting on? Are you a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4 or a 5? If you can just do that poll. Thank you very much indeed. That's brilliant. Now, it's nice for me to see that because everybody's feeling quite confident with what we've done so far. So, good learning point here. I'm going to get everybody else to have a look at, because you've structured those sentences absolutely perfectly well, Jack and Tom. But have a look at your own work, or maybe other people can help you now. What does Jack's need extra to make it follow the rules for punctuation? Yeah, so you need a capital I, Jack. You're probably thinking, oh yes, of course I do. And at the end there, you need a full stop. Does that make sense, Harry? Jack, sorry. And Tom, what do you need? Yeah, Lois has helped you there. Okay. I know they're only small things, and I know that You know, if you're writing a text to a friend, we don't tend to capitalise the beginnings of sentences. In fact, we can write everything in lowercase because it does make sense to your mate, but it's not going to go down well with an examiner. So just remember that, okay? No, it's no problem making a mistake. You can learn from it. Okay, now we're going to have a look at this idea of comma splicing. Does anybody know what that means? I'm just going to put it up on the screen. So if you know what comma splicing is, say yes. If you're not sure, say no. Great. Thank you, Charlotte and Harry and Tom. This looks like a great opportunity for me to be able to teach you something. You've heard of it, but you've forgotten. Okay, Jack, how about you? Have you heard of this? Same. Okay, so it's in the back of your minds, but you're not really sure. So let's just have a look. It's something that examiners talk about in their report, in their examiner's report. So that's why I've put it into a lesson for you. Okay. So comma splicing is not a favourite of examiners. They don't like to see it in your work. Okay. And it's basically placing a comma where a full stop could be used. So if you have a look at this, I ran a grueling marathon, my lungs were burning. Now if you look at that, that is a... Let me just get my pen out in a different colour. That sentence makes sense on its own. I ran a grueling marathon. You could have a full stop there. The second one, the same. My lungs were burning. That is a sentence in its own right. So you could write it like that instead. I ran a grueling marathon, my lungs were burning. But exactly, Charlotte. Okay, and that's what they would love to see in your work. So let's have a look now. You could have a semicolon instead. Okay. So first of all, you could just use some sort of connective. My lungs were burning because I ran a learning marathon. So you've made it into a compound sentence now. Okay. Let me just check in with you. Is that making sense? Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Lois. Jack, is that making sense with you as well? So you could put some sort of connective or conjunction, as we call them, as well. Yeah, okay, everybody's saying yes with that. So both of those make sense. I ran a grueling marathon and my lungs were burning. These are the conjunctions or connectives that link the two ideas together. But if you just used a comma, that doesn't really link the two ideas together because they're separate. So I want you to have a quick think now. I'll give you a minute, and I'd like you please to write your own example. So have a think about what we've just learnt and do your own example. Super. I went shopping. The shops were extremely busy. I crawled out of bed. It was freezing. Two super examples there, Charlotte and Lois. Harry, can you think of one? And Tom? If you're not sure, have a look to see the kind of examples that Lois and Charlotte have just put in the chat box, because that might help you to sort your ideas out. So adding a semicolon there it does give a different pace, gives a different dimension to your answer. It makes it more easy to read, and that pause adds just a bit of extra meaning to your work as well. So you would get credit for doing that in an exam. So that's a little trick that you might think of. I woke up, I was knackered. Yeah, okay. Obviously, in an exam situation, Tom, we wouldn't use that word. It's a slang word, okay. But I get what you're saying. Tom, again, just have a look, because all of this will help to improve. Yeah. Can you see when you put I was knackered? You need a capital I. You always need a capital I for you, Tom. I'm sure you know that. Yeah. Okay, so you never, if yeah, you knew that. So just get into the habit of writing things correctly, because when you're in the exam, you've enough to think of, rather than making sort of those common mistakes. Harry, are you finding this a little bit? Oh, here we go. Yeah, we brilliant. It's early morning. The sky is blue. You've all done a very good example there. Harry, what do you need at the end there after blue? I know you must think that I'm being really picky here, but I'm only doing it to help you, to get you into the habit of doing it all the time. All right? And it's much better me telling you, because I'm on your side, than you're making that mistake in the exam, because the examiner will just say, oh, they don't know how to use full stops. Okay? And I want you all to do as well as you possibly can. Okay, let's move on. So let's think about where we might find comma splicing in this extract. I was nervous, making my way through the crowd in the darkness. Lights glistened in time to the music. I blinked at the brightness. Fetching a drink from the corner, I looked at the food on offer. It was a pretty good spread. Holly had already made an effort. It was just a shame that her mum had made a massive princess cake. The thing was wonky, but the creepy smile on its face was the worst part. Okay, now just spend 10 seconds looking at that, skim and scan through it, and think to yourselves now, because I'm going to show you the next slide, but think to yourselves now, where could you introduce a semicolon rather than a comma? Where would it help? Where can you see that two ideas have been linked together using a comma where, so you've said after music, okay. So I'm just going to show you now, okay. You were right, Charlotte. So those two ideas, lights glistened in time to the music, that's an idea on its own, isn't it? You could have lights glistened in time to the music and I blinked at the brightness. But you could also introduce a semicolon. Lights glistened in time to the music. I blinked at the brightness. And this one, it was a pretty good spread, because Holly had really made an effort. So you could, as I say, use a connective there, but you could equally well use a semicolon. Okay. So let's have a look at how you've understood that. I'll just put 1 to 5 again. Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Charlotte. And thanks, Lois. That's brilliant. Again, it's lovely for me to see this because you're all feeling quite confident. Okay. Now, we've only got 2 minutes left. And I will run through this quickly because you might like to catch it on playback. Okay. So colons and semicolons, another silly little thing. I think I got this from, I think I got it from Grammarly maybe. Why are you crying? Because nobody understands me. Okay, so let's see if we can get you all understanding when a semicolon is the best piece of punctuation to use. So what is a colon and how would you use it? This is a definition from the internet. A colon is a strong punctuation symbol and is used to indicate to the reader that some further information is going to appear in the following statement. It's usually used to introduce a list or introduce an explanation, a conclusion, or an amplification if you need to really emphasize something. Okay, so I suggest you do a quick screenshot of that or do one when you catch it on playback. I'll just leave it on the screen there for another 5 seconds. Okay, I'm going to move on. A colon has 2 uses. So a colon shows that something is to follow, often a list. So my sister told me to buy the following, and you can see here we've got the colon there, a drill, a leather jacket, a pair of false teeth, and a green bucket. Can anybody tell me why a semicolon has been used there rather than a comma? Does anybody know the answer to that? Not really sure there, Harry. I'm going to teach you now then. Okay, it's very simple, and it's something. It's something that is really easy to learn and understand. If the item in that list is more than one word long, okay. So when you said I'm studying English, maths, and science, those words are one word long, so they just have a comma behind them. Can you see here? There are several words, so it's a drill, a leather jacket, a pair of false teeth, and a green bucket. So if the words in the list are more than two, you use a semicolon instead of a comma. Does that make sense? Quick yes, no. Dead easy to understand that, really. Thanks, show. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Okay. So you're all saying that that makes sense now. So that's something else learnt today. Well done. Okay. And then the second use of colons is to imply a strong relationship between the group of words before the colon and after it. So he got the job in spite of his poor qualifications. His mother was the manager. So that is using a colon rather than a semicolon for extra emphasis. I will not buy this table. It is scratched. Okay, much more dramatic use of punctuation by using the colon rather than a comma. Okay. We're just going slightly over. I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to get to the end of this so you understand it. And as I say, you can always get it on playback. So you can see here, why is it that in this instance a comma is used rather than a semicolon? That teaching point I gave you before. Yeah, well done, Charlotte. It's one word, isn't it? And here is another example of where we need to use semicolons because it's a consecrated wafer, holy water blessed by a Roman Catholic priest, semicolon, a cross, a magic circle of blood or chalk, iron, and a wooden stake. Okay. And there's another example as well. He threw away his smelly socks. He went for a jog in fresh ones. Ooh. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that up so you can see it if you catch it on playback. And then what we're going to do is think about this final question here. Have you learnt anything new today? How can you improve your skills further? So just tell me quickly something that you've learnt today. And what can you do to make sure that you punctuate your work accurately? Okay, so Charlotte, you've remembered that the semicolon works for two words. So Harry, Lois, Tom, the comma splicing bit, you've said, Lois, well done. How to use a semicolon, well done, Harry. Tom, what will you take away from this lesson today? I'm sorry I've taken you over time, so obviously you might have to log on to another lesson today in a minute. So how to use a semicolon as well. Fantastic, everybody. Well done. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Okay, you're welcome to log out now. That's okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.
You are currently the only person in this conference.